Now, obviously, if you go and find something on the internet, generally you're going to use Google. Most people do. And of course, Google has a wealth of data available to it about how people are looking for things, and in this case, cars. So I'd like to invite up Rob Coyne, the market lead for Google New Zealand, who's going to go through some really interesting statistics and details around that path people are taking to find you and the car that you have on their dealership.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that, and kia ora, everyone. My name is Rob Coyne. I'm a market lead for Google here in New Zealand. Really excited to be sharing with you today. And maybe before we get started, I'd love to get an idea about the audience that's in the room. Maybe a quick show of hands of the dealers that are here, just to understand. Great. What about sort of manufacturers or suppliers? Cool. And maybe finance partners? Or do we also have those in the room? Fantastic. So cool. It's good to understand sort of the mix here, and really hope that this research today is useful for you. Essentially what we've done is we've partnered with Kantar to help understand sort of the new car buyer journey. And this is across Australia and New Zealand data. But I really wanted to share sort of a few key points with you today. And unfortunately, I have limited time today, so I have about 20 minutes. So I'm not going to cover all this content. But what we are going to cover today is the modern research journey and what consumers are using, the frequency of that they are using online touchpoints and offline touchpoints, as well as the role that dealerships and online purchase options are playing in the rise of online purchase options. So I thought I'd start off today with a few key insights. I understand that these screens are maybe a bit small, so I'll do my best to highlight some of the key researches. But first, looking at sort of the consumer profiles, we see that life events are definitely the main triggers for consumers. So 41% of consumers who are purchasing new cars is because of a life event. So we're seeing that 4% of new car buyers are buying EVs, and among premium car buyers, that's actually much higher at 18%. Now, the modern research journey has shifted and changed over the years, but 49% of consumers need less than a month to decide on a car to purchase. And majority of the discovery and the majority of the research for these cars are happening online. So 77% of discovery for new cars happens online, and 90% of research happens online as well. So it's really important to think about how, as a manufacturer, as a dealer, and as finance providers, we show up for those customers when they are going through that month cycle of deciding which car to purchase. Now, specifically, online search and online video are the two top online channels for research and discovery, with video actually driving a ton of the action. So 75% of consumers who watched online video took an action on the back end of that for the car purchase journey. Now, dealerships and online payment options, we'll take a bit of a look into this, but 13% of new cars were purchased online or via an app in 2022. We're seeing that because of the lower number of car dealership visits, there's limited options for dealers to really have the impact that they want. So we really want to focus on the strengths that dealerships have and connect to the consumers and make sure that we are answering the questions and being helpful to those consumers when they do show up to our dealers, so that we can convert them at a higher rate. Additionally, we want to try to avoid those possible turnoffs that people may have about possibly visiting a dealer, and particularly those were around avoiding pressure from salespeople and avoiding sort of the unwanted services of potential upsells. So we need to be conscious of that. There's a hybrid purchase journey we need to be aware of as well as we look forward into the future. So we saw that 60% of consumers would consider buying a car online for future car purchases. But ultimately, what we are seeing is that dealers still play a massively important role in actually selling and that final stage of buying the cars. Looking at millennials, we'll take a quick highlight here. We're not going to dive into this content today, but I'll just do a quick summary for you. So for millennials, life events is by far the biggest trigger for millennials to buy their first car. And millennials are more online oriented versus their older cohort. So the average is 5.5 online sources of research for consumers, but for millennials, it's 6.6. Now, when thinking about electric vehicles and considered buyers, only 12% of new car buyers considered buying EVs, but 4% of them purchased. When looking at sort of how that affects consideration, EVs and PHEVs are really fantastic for driving consideration, but there's still concerns around cost and charging technology. Looking at sort of those luxury buyers as well, they are definitely more online than sort of less premium buyers, with 7.8 online touch points versus that average 5.5 that I said earlier. But again, we're going to focus on that modern research journey in the dealerships today. So looking at sort of the key changes from last year, we saw that the journey length was really unchanged. It was 50% in 2021. It's 49% in 2022. Online sources were a bit less, so not in terms of how much they are researching online, but the number of touch points that they are using online. So consumers are using less touch points than they were in 2021, which really speaks to how, as car manufacturers, as dealers, you need to show up and be helpful and answer the questions that consumers really want to ensure that your online touch point is going to hopefully convert them to showing up to your dealer and ultimately purchasing through you. Those online touch points were less, we mentioned, as well as sort of focusing on sort of those online tools. So specifically, the standard online tools focus around sort of car comparison and car configurations. And so if you as a dealer or you as a manufacturer have those, it's really important to make those front and center around answering those consumers' questions about potential buys. Looking at dealerships and online purchase options, we're on level with 2021. But the future purchase intention for potential online car buys is 60%. Still, majority of consumers prefer and intend to buy through dealerships, but there's an increase in online purchase intention for future car purchases. Dealer visits is slightly less, not in terms of total visits, but the total number of dealers that consumers are visiting. So the average is 2. That's down from 2.2 dealers that consumers visit on average from 2021. Test drives are also slightly less, being 1.6 versus 1.9 in 2021. And what that means is that consumers are more educated when they actually turn up to dealers, and so they are ready to make a decision quicker when they actually get into the car and test drive for the first time. So that really speaks to sort of the online education, the online discovery, the online research that consumers are really engaging in during this journey. So let's dive into the modern research journey. So the modern research journey is fast and it's online. As we said, 49% of consumers are going to spend less than a month. And that discovery, 77%, happens online, and 90% of consumers are researching their cars online. Now, search and video, massively important for driving consideration. Maybe again, a show of hands for the dealers and for the car manufacturers. How many have an active search strategy of how to engage customers? Just maybe a show of hands of people who have an active search strategy. Great. And what about online video? Does that play a role in sort of how you guys are thinking about reaching consumers? So maybe less so. But it'd be good to think about sort of how we can engage consumers in the journey and what channels they are using for that discovery and for that research. So as we said, it's fast. 24% of consumers need 2 weeks or less than a month. So 49% of consumers need less than a month. It's really, really fast. So how do we show up to consumers when they are in that consideration phase to consider them either showing up to our dealer or considering us as a brand? Now, the buyers from an online information standpoint, they're using less information sources, and so they're really looking for those trusted sources of information that they can use to inform their purchase decision. So it's decreased from 7.9 in 2021. This might be because potentially there's more lockdowns in 2021 than we have had this year, which is great. But consumers are using less sources online. So thinking about if consumers are showing up to your dealer website, if they're showing up to your brand websites, how can we be helpful? How can we surface content that's relevant to them, that they are really going to care about, to inform them and ultimately convert them into a buying customer? Now, search and video are the leading online sources for people when they are looking for content and researching about new cars. So search engine is 82% of research. Online video is 68%. Now, I purchased a new car this last year, and I think about my own purchase journey. I heavily used online video to really understand the feel of the car, what was it going to look like, how it compared to a potential another brand that I was considering, and this played really into my decision to really understand the concept. And ultimately, it only took me one test drive of the car that I was thinking of buying to bring me over the edge. But additionally, manufacturers' brands, website, and dealer websites play a really important role as well. So 59% and 53% of consumers who are using brand website and dealer websites for their online research. Thinking about the offline tools that people are using, it's clearly dealer visits and test drives. So these are the main offline touch points for consumers when they are researching cars. But again, when we think about what channels consumers are using when they are thinking about buying a car, I really like this graph because it highlights sort of where consumers are at the thinking, researching, and buying stage. And what we really see here is that search and online video are the two most used channels when it comes to online touch points for the thinking and researching stage. But dealers play a really important role in driving the buying action for consumers and really focusing on sort of the strengths of the dealers and honing in around and understanding where consumers are turning to for that research is going to help us connect to consumers and be more helpful. Now, search is frequently used and is viewed as a helpful source of information, while video and social media are not creating as much impact. And I'll go back to this last slide here because it's quite interesting to see that social media didn't have a huge impact in sort of thinking consideration of buying. And same with sort of the usefulness and the frequency of consumers using these different online touch points. So thinking about sort of the usefulness, dealer visits and test drive, massively useful touch points in a consumer journey to drive consideration and as well as search engines there, while online video and social media play a less important role. Now, 8 out of 10 consumers are discovering their car online, which really underscores the value that dealers' websites and car manufacturers' websites have in this research process. And we'll go into detail about the types of activities that are really helpful, particularly on dealer websites. So we'll touch on this, and it'll be important to think about how this could apply to your dealer website or to your car manufacturer website. And ultimately, buyers love the ability to research online because it's comfortable and it's time efficient. We don't have to go to the dealer to really get into the information, and we're trying to, and for consumers, they're feeling like it's more of an unbiased view potentially. And so with consumers, they're trying to inform themselves, and then when they actually end up showing up to the dealer, they are have a huge purchase intent, and so it's a really good opportunity for dealers to convert them. Now, thinking about the types of activity and types of tools that consumers are using for this research, we would say that the standard tools, specifically car comparisons, 360-degree videos of the car, and car configuration tools, these are the most useful tools that consumers are using for their research online. Now, there's some really cool advanced AR and VR tools that are coming about, and those are cool. But for the most part, consumers really view sort of those standard tools as the most useful and the most used types of tools online to inform their purchase decision. What we're also seeing is that YouTube is a really effective channel as well for driving decision making and consideration. So 28% of consumers said that YouTube helped influence them make a purchase, and 45% helped them narrow down their car research. And so it's a really effective way to connect to consumers when they are in that consideration zone and narrow down their research, because what we are seeing is that there's less brand loyalty than years previous, and so the consideration for consumers can be influenced by car manufacturers and dealers. And what we're also seeing is that online videos actually helps buyers take follow-up actions. So 75% of consumers who have seen online video are taking follow-up actions. And so a really good opportunity to engage with users who are receptive to auto content on YouTube and meet them where they are. Particularly sort of the actions that consumers are taking is that visit a dealer website, request a quote, and schedule test drive. So really good actions that dealers and manufacturers can think about to make sure that they are showing up and connecting with those consumers when they're on video content. So in types of the content that consumers care about online when it comes to video content, videos produced by video manufacturers ranks the highest, but also right behind it is videos produced by independent experts or professional reviewers. I know this played a massive role in my purchase journey of really trying to get that independent view, car comparisons, as well as the videos that the car manufacturer was producing. What types of videos you can think about producing potentially? Those walk-around videos are really helpful. Tests and comparisons are really helpful. Ultimately, when consumers are home and they're researching and discovering vehicles, they want to have a real world, real life experience of what does this car actually feel like, how is it potentially going to fit into my life, and how does it compare to the cars that I'm also considering. And what we're also seeing is even if consumers are not actively searching for cars on YouTube, they're very receptive to video content from auto manufacturers and from dealers. Importantly also is YouTube's fastest growing platform is connected TV, and connected TV users actually take more action on YouTube than mobile or desktop users. So thinking about the types of platforms or devices specifically you would target and how your content would show up to those users is a really important thing for you to consider. So what I'll do in this next section is really focus on sort of the role that dealerships play and sort of the rise of online purchase options. So what we're really seeing is that car dealerships and point of sale are still king. But there are some elements of online purchasing that are growing. So like we said, 13% of new cars were purchased online or via an app. There's a lower number of test drives and dealership visits, and so there's less of an opportunity for dealers to really shine. But it's really important to focus on the strengths, and we'll touch on this particularly around financing and contracting of how you can show up and be helpful to consumers and really help connect those dots and ultimately drive additional sales. And we need to think about this hybrid purchase journey as well. We said that 60% of consumers would consider buying a car online in the future. But if you look at the overall stats, still there's a high majority of consumers who would consider buying cars via a dealer moving forward as well. So new cars specifically are purchased primarily from standard car dealers or stationary car dealers, with only the 13% online. Now, interestingly enough, like I mentioned earlier, the number of dealer visits has decreased. Not in terms of foot traffic, but in terms of the number of dealers that consumers are visiting when they are purchasing options or when they are considering purchasing a new car. So it's decreased from 2.2 in 2021 to 2 in 2022. And so this really leads to the fact that consumers are more educated and they're researching and discovering their vehicles more online, so that when they show up to the dealer, they are more intentional about the car that they are looking to buy, and they need less time in the car and at the dealer to actually make that decision. Now, in terms of potential turnoffs that consumers have or hesitations for visiting dealers, these were sort of the top pressures that they felt for potentially not wanting to go to a dealer. So pressure from salespeople, attempts to sell unwanted services, those were the top turnoffs for consumers of potentially visiting dealers. And so it's important to keep that in mind as you connect to consumers and ensure that you're positioning yourself as a helpful partner and having sort of the financing options, which are ultimately the dealer's strengths, which can't happen online as effectively as sort of those in-person conversations, is a really important tool for us to think about. Now, inventory constraints are less of a concern now than they were in 2021, which is good to see. And like we said before, the number of test drives are down. And this is frequency of test drives, so the number of test drives that consumers need to actually make a purchase decision. So it's gone from 1.9 in 2021 to 1.6. So again, consumers are more considered when they actually show up and test drive cars, and therefore are needing less test drives to actually make that final purchase decision. So new car buyers are definitely open to online elements, yet car experiences and contracting are still taking place at the dealer. So this really talks to the strengths that dealers have and the important role that they have in the car purchase journey. And really, I think this should hopefully serve as a bit of a nugget of information of things that you can really focus on as dealers to be helpful to consumers and ultimately drive additional sales. Is focusing on the contracting, on the financing. That's what is still happening a lot at the dealers, and that's what consumers are saying that they want. So thinking about sort of those car experiences and how you can actually really bring to life the online research that those consumers have been going on is ultimately going to help drive additional sales and make those people who are considering buying a new car ultimately come over the edge and buy from you. So new car buyers, they are still buying from dealership, but the online purchase options are sort of future, are future options for them. We saw that sort of with car delivery and with car pickup, sort of online car purchasing and online at home car purchasing and sort of stationary purchase. Still, when you think about sort of those future car purchases, the dealer plays a really important role. But thinking about the role that online and that hybrid sales journey plays is something that we need to consider. Now, in terms of the vehicle options and financing details, these are really key for sort of dealer websites and OEMs. So what consumers really care about, what they found most helpful is really sort of the ease to compare different vehicle options and the ease of sort of the pricing and financing specifically. Those were top of mind for consumers when they thought about actually purchasing from an OEM or from a dealer. So if you have a dealer website, if you are a car manufacturer, thinking about how you can have these top of mind as far as car configuration and car details, which are going to assist the consumer with their research and ultimately drive them to additional purchase, are a few things that I would consider to really ensure that you are being helpful to consumers and making them be comfortable with purchasing a car through your preferred channel. That is the content I have today. I think we're going to have a Q&A session in a bit, so if you have questions, would love to hear from you and help answer any of those questions. But hopefully some of this information and content was useful for you guys today, and you guys can take this and hopefully apply it to your dealers.
Yeah. So thank you, Rob. Now we are just going to... We are going to hold any questions for Rob until the next section. We're just going to do two speakers at once for a bit of a panel. So if I can go to our next